Hello, and welcome to the featured speaker session with Dr. Lopez Matthews Jr. at Total Radical Imagination. My name is Dr. Tiwanna Nevels, Board Chair for the HBCU Library Alliance and Director of Library Services at St. Augustine's University. I will be moderating your session for today. Before I introduce today's featured speaker, I'd like to remind attendees we'll be following the Digital Library Federation Code of Conduct, which we'll place in the chat. Audience members, if you have questions for our speaker, please use the Q&A function found at the bottom of your Zoom client. We will turn to questions and answers at the 40-minute mark of this 50-minute session. And now I'm excited to introduce Dr. Lopez Matthews Jr., who is the State Archivist and Public Records Administrator for the District of Columbia. In this capacity, he serves as the historian for the District of Columbia, chairs the DC Historical Records Advisory Board, and is the director of the DC Office of Public Records and Archives. He is a Baltimore, Maryland native. He earned a BS in history from Coppin State University in 2004. He earned a master's degree in public history and archival administration from Howard University in 2006, and his PhD in United States history from Howard University in 2009. Currently, he is a member of the Council of State Archivists, and an executive council member of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. He has published several articles and is the author of Howard University in the World Worlds, Men and Women Serving the Nation. He is the host in Retrospect and Prospect, where he interviews practitioners about African American history projects for ASALH TV. In 2020, he became a senior advisor to the U.S. Truth, Healing, and Transformational Leadership Group. Dr. Matthews' presentation is on digitizing the Black experience, lessons learned, building an archive at an HBCU. Dr. Matthews, what wisdom will you be sharing with us today? Welcome to this session.
Thank you, Dr. Nevels. And my wisdom today will just be my experience working in the archival field. And I hope that many people can learn something from my experience because, I'm not a trained digital archivist. I've had to kind of learn over the years what I've been able to do. So that's just kind of what I want to share with people, talk about my experiences, and I guess give some inspiration.
Okay, well, you have the floor and we are waiting with bated breath.
All right, now I do have a PowerPoint to share because I need to speak from PowerPoint to keep myself on track.
Sure.
And I'm going to try to not talk too long so that we have enough time for discussion. And so I just want to start with just telling you all what I'm going to discuss today. I want to talk about the growing importance of digitization, state of HBCU archives in general, efforts at digitization at HBCUs, digitization at Moreland Spingarn, some tips and tricks for digitizations, and efforts at collaboration, the positives and the pitfalls. And before I continue, just know this is all from my experience. I can only speak from my experience. So in case you're wondering, this is So I think that it's important, just so you know my story. Dr. Nevels gave my bio, but I just want to talk a little bit more about how I've kind of traversed the archival field. I started at Coppin State University as a computer science major. Quickly learned I could not, I'm not a math person. So I had to pivot very quickly. I saw the way that was going. So I said, well, what else do I like? I realized I liked history. And I did a summer research internship with a professor at Coppin, and he took me to the National Archives. And before then, I had no idea that you could hold a record that was 100 years old. And so there I was working with the Freedmen's Bureau records back when they were at NARA. And I was just amazed. And I said, wow, I want other people to know that you could hold a record like this. I want other people to see that historical documents actually exist, because prior to that, I had no idea. And so I went to Howard to get a degree in public history. So not in MLIS, I have a degree in public history and archival administration. When I was coming into the world, the public history degree was, they say, oh yeah, you need this. So I said, okay. Because I knew I wanted to work in archives, but I also knew I wanted to teach as well. Maybe not teach full-time, but teach as an adjunct, which is what I do. And so I went to Howard. Well, before I went to Howard, I actually started working at the Maryland State Archives on their Beneath the Underground project, which was an amazing project documenting runaway slaves. So that was my first introduction to working in an archive. And that just kind of increased my interest in wanting to work with archives and archival records. So then while I was at Howard, I had the opportunity to work at the Moreland Springer Research Center, which has an amazing collection of Black history. I mean, it's phenomenal. I think no one really knows the depth of that collection. I mean, it's just amazing. Some of the things I got to work with, some of the people I got to meet, it's just amazing. And so my entire 5 years at Howard, I had 5 years of funding at Howard. So you see how quickly I moved through. I understood the assignment. I had 5 years of funding, so I needed to move through in that time. So I buckled down, focused, and moved through master's to PhD, but still working in archives. I worked on symposiums with the DC Humanities Council, the African American Museum for the Smithsonian, but still with an eye toward archives. After I left Howard, I went to the National Archives for about 4 years, worked in their holdings maintenance division, then with their processing division, then did a detail in their electronic records division, and then went back to Howard as an archivist in their university archives. And then after a year in the university archives, I became the digital production librarian, where I built their digital archive, which was a fantastic experience. And now I have transitioned to I call it DC State Archives, the DC Office of Public Records and Archives. And you may say, why do you call it a state archive? Because we are preparing for DC statehood. So my title is State Archivist and Public Records Administrator. So that's kind of how I have moved through the archival field and kind of learning things as I went along the way. So I just wanted to give you that background, just so you understand who I am and where I'm coming from. And I love HBCU archives, even though I'm no longer at an HBCU archive. I still have much love for HBCU archives. They're close to my heart because HBCUs were the place where Black history was preserved. They saw the importance of Black history. They saw the importance of archives. And I always like to bring up Dorothy Porter because she really built the archive at Howard in the face of others, even at Howard, who told her it wasn't important. But she understood the importance of preserving this history and preserving the documents to tell the story. So she would go to people's houses, she would go through trash cans, she would bully people into giving her their records because she understood its importance. And so she documented Black men, Black women, anyone who was important to the Black experience. And so, because she understood its importance. And so HBCUs really have been at the forefront. You know, she wasn't the only one. There are archives, at Fisk, at Tuskegee, at Spelman, at many of our HBCUs have done this. All of our HBCUs, to be a matter of fact, have done this because they understood their own history and they understood that they were the ones who had to preserve their own history because it was not seen as legitimate. It was not seen as important. That's why Carter G. Woodson started in 1915 the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History to professionalize the study of history, because he understood that there were those who discounted the Black experience, discounted the contributions of Black people to American history, Black people to world history. And so that's why I say Black history as opposed to African-American history, because they understood that Black people from around the world had an experience that needed to be documented, not just African-Americans here in the United States. And so one of the things that we are now grappling with is the growing importance of digitization. And digitization is revolutionizing access to collections. That is, in my opinion, the biggest role of digitization and the importance of digitization, because it revolutionizes access to this history. Because now, once it's digitized and made available, anyone with an internet device, phone, desktop, computer, laptop, can access historical documents and read them. And to be able to read the actual words that people said really increases your understanding of history, your understanding of what the goals were. For example, in my class that I teach at Bowie State, I showed them copies of the American Colonization Society minutes from 1831. We were talking about them. We were talking about how they were created to immigrate African Americans out of the United States, freed African Americans out of the United States and to the country of Liberia. And they clearly state, we're taking them out of this country because they are a bad influence on those who are enslaved, because they make them want freedom. They say they are also a conduit for us to Christianize the continent of Africa and to remove them from the darkness into the light. These are their words. And so the students really get a chance to read that, and it helps them really understand kind of the Black experience in America and what was happening. Now, it also supports preservation because it helps you to access material that, if you continue to touch it, would be destroyed from handling. So now you can digitize it and say, well, you can't see the original because the original is in pretty tough shape, but you can see this digital version, or we can put in an exhibit a really good digital version of this document so it doesn't get exposed to light and air and all the dangers that come with putting original documents on display. And also, you can reconstruct documents that are a little torn, a little messed up, and make them look pretty for people to see. So, but it also gives you the opportunity, and I say digitization, but also as part of that, it gives you an opportunity to store and share born digital media. Today, everything is created on a computer. You have email, you have Word docs, you have PDFs. How is that information going to be shared with the world historically? How is it going to be preserved? And so under the idea of digitization, you also have digital preservation, which I should have put on the slide. And it allows you to continue to preserve historic documents and continue to make them available. Now, I just say the state of HBCU archives in general, and this is just from what, I have experienced, my experience. And just looking at Fisk, Spelman, what we were doing in Howard, what they're doing at Tuskegee, the Woodruff AU Center, and at other HBCUs, excuse me, a lot of them are moving into the digital space. They're building digital platforms. They're digitizing their collections. They're making them available to people around the world. Some of that is in partnership with other institutions, but a lot of it is from the institutions themselves kind of taking the initiative to build these platforms to share their history. And I was about to mention HBC Library Alliance, but I think that's on another slide, so I will stop talking before I go past it. But one of the things that I like to mention is that we also speak to one another. We share knowledge among ourselves. If we learn something and someone else is looking to work with it, we'll call up and say, hey, how did you do that? Hey, what machines are you using? Hey, how are you making that available? And we'll share knowledge with each other. Because I know I was not formally trained as a digital archivist, but in working in this space, I have attended webinars, I have talked to vendors, I have read literature And I've learned what needs to be done. And I've figured out ways to do this work and make it available. And I say, where are they in the discussion? Because often discussions about HBCUs in this work focus on what they don't have. And I like to focus on what they do have. And what they do have is a wealth of knowledge at these institutions to preserve their history. They've been doing it for over 100 years, and they're continuing to do it. And they're continuing to build knowledge, even if it's not kind of at the forefront. I'm here speaking, but many of my colleagues don't speak. Our field tends to attract introverted people, so they aren't really interested in going out and speaking to people, but they are interested in doing the work, and they are doing the work. And so sometimes that leads to an invisibility of people working at HBCUs who are doing this work because they're not, out in SAA, they're not at MERAC, they're not at ALA, but they're still doing the work. And so sometimes you have those who have discussions, and I've seen them, where they talk about how the archives does not preserve a certain type of history or that history, but it is being preserved at HBCUs. And I actually saw an event where someone brought up the fact that HBCUs were doing the work, and the speaker responded, "Oh, we're not talking about you." And the thing was, but you're talking about archives, and we are a part of the archival field. So you can't just discuss archives and ignore HBCUs, because we do exist. We do contain a large amount of the American experience. And so, I think that HBCUs really should be included as a part of the discussion. Just like we're saying African-American history is American history, HBCUs and the work that they do are a part of the archival field. Now, I do have the HBCU Library Alliance. See, I can remember what my slides look like sometimes. So just to highlight some of the digitization projects at HBCUs, the HBCU Library Alliance has really worked to bring digital resources to HBCUs, bring knowledge, bring support, and steward partnerships with HBCUs. They do have a platform for HBCU presidential history with digitized records that is available. I've utilized it myself. It is wonderful. FISC is currently working on a digitization project. They received a large grant from Mellon to build a digital platform and project out of their Fiskiana collection. Delisa Mina Harris is doing some great work over there at FISC. The Robert Woodruff AU Center has been doing wonderful digitization work for years under Karen Jefferson and Andrea Gavin, and they're just doing great work down there in Atlanta. Of course, Holly Smith at Spelman's doing great work with their collection, making sure that that is accessible and digital. And now to talk about my own experience. Howard started their digital archive with a grant from Mellon. They received a grant from Mellon around 2012, where we first started working on building the digital archive at Howard and beginning the digitization efforts at Howard University. And one of the things that we kind of focused on when we first started was building trust, because there is concern about making things digital. How are we going to control what people do with it? How are you going to make it available? Will it destroy the original documents? Because digitization can be very destructive to the original document. Most people don't focus on that, but it can be. We had a book from, and now the date just left my head. It was 1794, Digitizing it. That book was so fragile that we had to digitize it in a special way. We couldn't put it on a flatbed. We couldn't put it on our book scanner. We had to use a camera to digitize it, and digitize it carefully, because, well, some people say it's okay to destroy the original because you have a digital copy. I am not of that mindset. My idea is that the original is paramount. And so, we just took our time digitizing that book. But so those were some of the early considerations. And then how do we make it available? And so we chose a platform, but we evaluated what we could do in-house, what we could manage in-house. And we understood that we didn't have the capacity to really build an in-house system. So we contracted out and hired a company that could produce a digital repository that would make it widely available. We needed something that, you don't have to come to Howard or know that the records are at Howard to find what's on our digital repository. We understood that it needed to be wired. So we picked a platform that was accessible by Google and was crawled by Google. So if you Google the topic, our stuff will come up in the Google search because we understood that the goal was access. And so we wanted anyone who was looking up these topics to do it. So we also said, okay, what are we going to digitize? What's a priority? Because often with digitization, you have to, especially because of money. A lot of people say, oh, just digitize everything. But that would take millions upon millions of dollars to just go in and digitize everything. So you have to be strategic. So our first collection was the yearbooks. We understood that would be exciting to alumni, that would bring people's interest. We also did historic faculty publications because Howard has a long history of having intellectual giants work for the institution. So we highlighted some of their early work. We also did photographs. People like looking at pretty pictures. So we knew people would like to see photographs. So we did a lot of photographs. There were some that were scanned in a previous digitization project. So we took those and beefed up the metadata and put that on the site. We also did Oliver Otis Howard's collection. He's the namesake of Howard University. So we said, well, he's a great person to choose to digitize his collection. We did the ROTC collection because that in 2017, the theme for Black History for that year was Black people in the military. So we said, well, let's digitize our documents related to Black people in the military. So we did that. We had a great collection of letters from Howard alumni who were in World War II, who wrote back to the institution while they were serving overseas. Just a great resource for learning about the Black experience during World War II. So we said, well, that'd be great to put up on the repository. And then we looked at the equipment we needed. Okay, how are we going to do this? Do we use cameras? Do we use flatbeds? We did a combination. How are we going to store it? What's going to happen with these digital files? So I had to learn metadata schemes and say, okay, well, which metadata scheme will work best for us? And so, our repository used Dublin Core. So I taught myself Dublin Core, and I'll say Dublin Core is a metadata standard, just in case you don't know that. That's a metadata standard. So this is what you collect so that you can find and track your digital records. And so I taught myself that. That's what I actually took with myself to the DC archives. So now that's what we're using at the DC archives because that's what I know. And so we also, and I'll talk to this a little bit later, but we also reached out to people who supported the institution to say, hey, we need a couple more computers. So we got computers donated to us so that we could expand the digital lab. We expanded the digital lab to about 9 scanning stations with the support of people who were friends of the library, Friends of Howard, donating money and resources as well. And so, we kind of used our support system to build the digital archive. And that was one of the lessons learned, that you have to be agile and you have to be a problem solver. Because if an issue came up, you couldn't just say, oh, let me reach out to this office to get help. Let me reach out to that office to get help. That help wasn't going to come. And so you had to figure out, okay, how am I going to fix this? How am I going to store this? How am I going to provide the necessary duplication to make sure that these digital files are stored correctly? And so one of the lessons that I learned is, if you are working at an institution like an HBCU, you're going to have to learn to be resourceful, and you're going to have to teach yourself how things are done. You know, you won't necessarily have the opportunity to attend these expensive classes that other people have. So you have to look around for free things to learn. You have to read the literature. You have to talk to vendors, because vendors are actually very resourceful, very useful with information. You know, you may not buy what they're selling, but you will have learned a lot after having that conversation with them, you know. Thanks for your knowledge, you know. And that's why I talk about the tips and tricks for digitization, because you have to understand your institutional capacity. Do we have the capacity to do what I want to do? And if we don't, how can we still do it with that lack of capacity? One of the things that we did when we worked on the digital platform at Howard was we really worked to gather institutional support, which was actually more difficult than you would think, because part of our digital platform was a publishing platform and a selected work site as well. So we wanted to have institutional research profiles for our professors. We also wanted to start to kind of publish things in-house. And for the first year or two, I went around to departmental meetings. I went to our teacher training sessions, went to departmental meetings, just kind of trying to encourage people to participate, encourage people to share their research, because, you know, people go into ResearchGate, which you violate your copyright, go into ResearchGate, but you don't using your institutional repository. So trying to explain that to people, that that's a better place to share your research. There's also a digital commons connection there. But it just was slow going to get people to participate, because many people were overworked. And so one of the things that we did was we got work study students to come in and build the profiles for the professors. I said, okay, we built this profile for you. Here's your login, keep it updated. So you don't have to actually spend the time to actually build your profile like we thought we were going to have them do in the beginning. You know, kind of being resourceful, being agile, pivoting, because it really wasn't working. Then you have to look at, okay, how do we get the administration to see the value of what we're doing? Because as money gets tight, the library is a very big budget, very big target for cuts, because when you're trying to cut budgets, you say, oh, where can we cut? Ooh, look at all this money over here. But you don't realize that we actually need that money to survive. So you have to really work with your administration to help them understand that this is important work, you know? So that's also part of how you decide what to digitize. What's going to bring attention to your institution, bring attention to your repository. That's how we got to the Hilltop student newspaper, which was digitized. We did that project because we understood the attention that would bring to the repository and the attention that it would bring from the administration, because we knew it would get alumni's attention. And it did. There was not much support when we first started that project, because they couldn't really see it. But once it went up, they're like, oh, this is amazing. And so, you know, people cite it all the time. And it's brought us into the current Black Press Archives digitization project that I know Brandon Nightingale is leading. And he spoke yesterday, I believe, about that project, which is amazing. And it's going to be fantastic. To that end, you have to find funding opportunities. There are grants out there for HBCUs. Many grants have a lot of paperwork. And so many people don't apply just because they don't have the institutional capacity to even apply for the grant, that you just don't have the time to put it together. Like even the grant we received from IMLS, you know, I had to block off time and say, no, this is all I'm focusing on to get that grant completed. And thankfully I had the latitude to do that. But some people don't have the latitude to do that. And so you sometimes have to go at it another way. You have to do fundraising. You have to crowdsource funding for your digital projects, or reach out to alumni who you know will love, who love the institution and want to support it. For example, we digitized the Hilltop with a donation from one of our alumni, Paul Cotton, whose name is on the early ones. You know, I knew him because I'm a Howard alum. I'm part of the Howard networks. I reached out to him. I told him what I was trying to do. He was like, oh, that's amazing. I would love to see it. And so he decided to support it. And that just came from a conversation we had. And so sometimes you have to be creative in how you reach out to people and who you speak out to. You know, and I thank him to this day for supporting that project, because that just came from a quick conversation that we had with, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. And he said, oh, this is great. I'm going to support it. And I'm going to look at my time because I don't want to go talk too long. But I think I'm still in my...
You're fine. I'll make sure you're on task.
All right. I'm still in my sweet
You're doing just fine.
Good. So one of the things that has also supported the work that we do is partnerships. And as I mentioned, the institutional capacity, sometimes you can't just go it alone. And so sometimes you have to partner and you have to collaborate with other institutions. And there can be some real positives to that. You know, there can be some real true partnerships between HBCUs, and between HBCUs and PWIs or public institutions to do work. I like to bring up the partnership that we did with Penn State, Shirley Moody Turner, and the Digitizing the Black Experience project there. We developed a great partnership between Howard and Penn State to digitize the Anna Julia Cooper collection. They have an Anna Julia Cooper Center. They wanted their students to have access to Anna Julia Cooper's papers. We hold Anna Julia Cooper's papers at Moreland Spingarn. So we partnered to digitize that collection. We made it available on Digital Howard, and now their students have access to those records, and they're doing class projects. And I saw a research project that I come across on Twitter that a student did working with her papers, and it was great. And so we worked together to support with a shared goal, and that made that collection available. Now there are pitfalls. You know, is it a true partnership? You know, are you really working to support each other, or are you working because you want to get the history out of the HBCU? I've heard people say that, oh, some great history at HBCUs, we have to get it out of there. And so there are those who seek to partner, not necessarily to support the HBCU and support their collections, but to get that history out of the HBCU. And they can make it available somewhere else, and the history is available, and the HBCU is still where it was when the project started. And there can be some long-term ramifications to that. I put copyright up there, but copyright has a limitation. And once copyright expires, that's it. You know, I've seen projects where they say, oh, we won't take your copyright. But a lot of material at HBCUs are out of copyright. And so, and every year that line moves. And so more stuff falls out of copyright, more stuff falls out of copyright, and more stuff falls out of copyright. And then the HBCU is left holding nothing. And the material that they've preserved for hundreds of years is available somewhere else. And people are going to the other place to get that material. And the HBCU is left with this erroneous perception that, oh, you know, well, they just couldn't preserve that history. So they have it over here, making sure that it's available because, you know, they couldn't do it over there. So it becomes something disparaging toward the HBCU. And then their administrations look at them and say, well, why do we need to continue to fund you at this level when the material is available over here? So why do we need you if it's already available? And so it puts you on shaky ground. And so while I was at Howard, I was very careful with the places that we partnered with. what happened with the digitized material. And I'm very open with, you see, when you go to Digital Howard, everything has a watermark on it, and a nice watermark, because I wanted you to know that that material came from Howard University. It came from Moreland Spingarn. This is material that we have preserved for hundreds of years, 50 years, 70 years. So we wanted you to know that we saw the importance of it and we made it available, because we understand that, you know, it's knowledge and it's history and it needs to be made available. But you also have to understand who made that material available as a
Dr.
practitioner.
Lopez, you have about 4 minutes before we
Oh,
go into Q&A.
hey, I'm bringing this in for a landing because I think I'm at the end. So see that just in time. Thank you. I put this picture on there because I like the smile. So that's me. But, so thank you for listening to my chat. This is my professional email address, and that is my website. If you would like to go look at some of my speaking engagements, as Dr. Nevels mentioned, I have a show that I do on Asala TV in Retrospect and Prospect, talking about interesting projects in public history. So you can check that out and learn a little bit more about moi. So thank you. And I will stop
Thank you
sharing
so
my.
much. Thank you so much for that presentation.
Thank you.
And I want to say thank you for bringing up Anna Julia Cooper, who started school at 9 years old at St. Augustine University. So thank you for bringing that up. So we're going to go right into questions and answers. I have some already ready for you. If you're ready,
yes,
let's begin. So the first one says, what are your thoughts on digital collection aggregators, such as the Digital Public Library of America? Are they meeting the needs of HBCUs? What could they do better to expand access to HBCU digital collections? Or are there better ways to do this?
So I think the aggregators are great because they direct traffic to the HBCU's institutional repository. Like, I love the OAI link idea, where you link the collections through OAI, so that if someone's searching in your aggregator, it'll take them back to the institution's site, so that they can get those numbers, so that they can show that people are actually interested in their collections. Because I was so excited to see over 1 million people have visited Digital Howard and used it. And then we can take that and show the administration, hey, people are using this, so continue to fund what we're doing. So I think that they are a great resource to direct people to HBCU collections. But I also think that that attribution line needs to be there, because, I mean, you know, you could say, oh, it's your ego, but no, they need the credit for what they're doing, because they don't have, you know, HBCUs don't, it's not taken for granted that HBCUs are doing the work. And so they need that credit. And so that's one of the things that I think needs to be kept in mind. There are partnership projects where you don't even know that there was another institution that worked on that project. And so, you know, that's one of the things that I think needs to be part of the conversation.
Okay. So the next question says, what strategies do you employ, or would you suggest, in the digital preservation and, perhaps more importantly, the online presentation of racially insensitive or offensive historical content?
So I think with that, you just need to be clear why you're actually showing this information. You can't just put it out there and say, oh, look at this Aunt Jemima poster. Oh, look at this, you know. You have to say, this is what this is what we're showing it, and this is what we want you to get from it. You have to be very explicit in what your intent and what your purpose is. Every place you come into contact with that material. So like, you can't just have it where, oh, you can just click on the picture and not actually see a description next to it. You need to be very clear what it is and why you're showing it and what you want people to get from it. Because you can show it because it's a part of history, but you just have to be clear in why you're showing it and what you want people to get out of it.
So to piggyback off of that question, what do you say to institutions who have collections where they selectively do not give you access to certain materials because they feel like it's insensitive? But you feel it's an important part of American history.
Well, I think that those institutions have to ask themselves, why are you keeping it from the light? What does it say about you that you aren't showing it? Because I think the fact that you're not showing it says more about you than it does about the actual documents, because you already understand that it's insensitive. You can't provide context to why it's insensitive and say, this is what happened, this is what it is, and this is why it's bad. You just understand that you need to provide context because it happened and there's no reason to sweep it under the rug. We know it happened. We need to know it happened. And if you sweep it under the rug, then people forget that it happened, or it gives people the opportunity to say, I feel uncomfortable about this history, so you can't teach it, which history can sometimes be uncomfortable, but that's the purpose, so that we understand what happened and we learn from it. That's the purpose of the study of history, to learn from the past so that we don't make the mistakes again. So personally, me, Lopez Matthews, does not see a need to hide anything, because I think that you just contextualize it and say, this was wrong. You can say it. You don't have to, give feigned neutrality. Certain things don't deserve a feigned neutrality. You can say, this was terrible. With the Holocaust, we say, this was terrible and this is what happened. With slavery, we say, this was terrible and this is what happened. And so, because there's power in that. This happened, this was terrible. I know I said that like 5 times,
Yeah.
but I really think that is
Thank
what
you
people
so much
really
for
need
that. I
to
really
say.
appreciated that answer. That is something that I am dealing with currently. So we'll go on to the next one, which says, thanks for the commentary regarding the time capacity necessary to apply for a grant, as well as the time and capacity necessary to implement grant funded work. What are some of the lessons you have learned that might be good advice for those who still want to pursue grant funded work despite the challenges of time and capacity?
I would say make good friends in your institutional grants office. Talk to them, befriend them, visit them, chat with them, email them, give them grace, understand that they have a lot to do as well, and say, I understand, I'm just working with you. I'm just figuring out how I can help you so we can get this thing done, And so just understand, build a relationship with them because they know the process. They'll know something that you don't know. They'll say, oh, don't forget to do this. Thank you. Got it. And so just build relationships with them and work with them, and they can support you. The grants office at Howard is very helpful and very supportive and very just, hey, don't forget to turn this in. Hey, don't forget you got to go do this. And I'm like, oh, thank you. I didn't know that. So that's one of the things that I think could be very helpful, just building those institutional relationships, and even talk with the funders, build a relationship with them. And how we got caught up in the COVID-19 pandemic. So all of a sudden our project stopped for a long time because the school wasn't open. So no one was there doing the work. So we had to reach out like, hey, sorry, we can't do any work because the school's closed. So, keeping up relationships with them and seeing how they can work with you and support you as well. So it's all about relationship building.
Thank you. Okay, so the next one says, thank you for a great talk, Dr. Matthews. This is more of a comment than a question, or at least I'm being honest about it. But I want to bring NMAAHC/HBCU project, which is still a work in progress, to the group's attention. So there's a link here. Maybe there's something that everyone can look at later, so that we can continue on. But there is a link in the Q&A section so that you can view the link for this group's project.
Got it. Yeah, and the Smithsonian is doing a project to support digitization at HBCUs. So I would say check that out. Oh, her name just left my head. The person leading that project, we worked together before. But I would say, check it out, see if the project is good for your institution. You always have to do your background search, read through the terms, always read the terms. I saw a grant for I'll just say I saw a grant for HBCUs, and the website said one thing, but then when you read those terms, and it was like, wait a minute, what's happening here? And so always read the terms, the small print, the devil's in the details.
That is a good piece of advice.
Oh yeah, but they are doing some good work over at the Smithsonian, so I would say check them out.
Okay. All right, so the next one says, during your time building out Howard University's digital archive, did your team put any emphasis on aligning your digital surrogates to a digitization standard like FADGI, for example?
Yes, we follow FADGI standards. That's what we follow for our digitization. Because why reinvent the wheel? They've done all the technical work. They've done all the studies, and you can just print the thing out from the FADGI website. So I just went on FADGI website, printed the book out and said, okay, this is what we need to do. When I talk about training myself to do this work, that's how I train myself to do this work. I just went to the people who were doing it and said, oh, there's your documentation. Got it, thanks.
All right, so the next one says, thank you. Would love to hear from folks on how to support Global South authors. How can we assist African projects/platforms that support scholars on the African continent?
I'm glad they asked that question because I'm actually involved in a project in Guinea right now. And the way that we chose to do it was to share knowledge. This is how you can do it. This is what you need to do. Here's the roadmap for how to do what you want to do. And here are some vendors, because a lot of them are in the same boat as a lot of HBCUs. They don't have the capacity. So here's a vendor that can support you and build that capacity and provide the support that you need. And now we'll work with you to find people to actually fund it to keep that going. So I think knowledge sharing is one of the biggest contributions that we can make. Because a lot of times people can do it themselves if they knew what to do. And so that's my suggestion there.
Now, there was another part to this. It wasn't a question, but I'll read it just to have full disclosure. It says, please see Dr. Reggie Raju and Monica Berger references. Monica spoke at ACRL and ALA, focused on digital equity, but how can librarians do more to support African authors who are unlikely to be invited in Western publishing/open access systems and can afford transformative agreements?
Got it. And that's why I said, share knowledge to show them how to do it. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't go to big organizations. This will be my first year going to SAA. I have never been to ALA. I stay where I can afford to go. And so, you won't see me there. Sorry. But you can email me and I'll talk to you. But you won't see me there because it is cost prohibitive to go to a lot of these places. And so that's why, the knowledge sharing amongst ourselves is so important, because maybe one of us got the chance to go there and they can bring back the knowledge that they got and share with the rest of us. And so that's why I say building knowledge sharing relationships is probably one of the best ways to go.
Okay, so it looks like we have come to the end of our session, as well as our questions. I will mention that Jerome Offord says, amazing job.
Thank you,
He is
Brother
also
Jerome.
heading some amazing digitalization projects
He is doing a
with the
great job
Harvard
at
team
Harvard.
at Harvard
Yep,
University.
great
Yes,
job. He's
he
doing a
is
great
working
work
with the
over there.
HBCU Library Alliance.
Yes.
So we are super excited about that. But we want to say to you, Dr. Lopez, thank you for such an amazing talk. This has been great information, especially for me. And I hope that our audience got a lot out of this. And thank you all for being a part of this session today.
Yes, thank you. And if you want to reach out to me, reach out. I do reply to email.
Okay. Note to self, everyone, make sure if you have additional questions, please reach out to him.